Sad songs are the medicine for when you're depressed. Paradoxically, perhaps, if you're depressed, it's typically because you feel misunderstood.
Right.
The last thing you want is a rousing Sousa march or something to come on, straighten up and fly right. What's the matter with you? It's a bunch of happy people continuing to misunderstand you, perpetuating that.
So you want your music to meet you where you are.
Exactly right. When the sad song comes on, you go, that person understands me. Lyrics certainly have poetic qualities, but they're different because the music has its own internal momentum, its driving force forward, and the music gives you permission to let go and let it determine for you the pace.
It's so clever.
This is a great moment in history for music. There are 200 million songs on the streaming services.
Of course.
This is a great opportunity for songwriters and musicians who otherwise wouldn't be able to find an audience to be discovered. And if you start playing around and looking at what's out there, you may find a new favorite song by an artist you've never heard of.
Virgin Radio.
Next guest is a neuroscientist, psychologist and best-selling author who's just written a book about music and promptly got an endorsement from actual Paul McCartney. Music as Medicine, How We Can Harness Its Therapeutic Power is out tomorrow. So let's all drive our Chevy to the Daniel Levitin!
Yeah! Hi, Dan.
Infinite Tulips, that's a great name for a prog rock band.
It is, isn't it? The Infinite Tulips.
Yeah.
Yeah, gosh. So many questions about heavy metal, but we don't have time for this today. Right, first things first. How the heck did you get Paul McCartney to blurb the back of your book to the extent of this? For many years, I've wondered why a bunch of frequencies organised into a piece of music has the ability, even without words, to make the listener cry and become emotional. This book answers those questions, says Paul McCartney.
Amazing. I don't know him. He read an advance copy of the book. It must have touched him.
So, but how does that happen? Who sends him the book? And then did they ask him to blurb it? Or does he just feel like he has to blurb it because it's so good and he wants other people to know?
I woke up one morning, like a year after I had handed the manuscript in, and I got an email from my agent saying, Paul McCartney forwards this message. I would like to blurb Dr. Levitin's book. If you can use this.
Yes. I think we might be able to, Paul.
If we can squeeze it in.
And isn't it wonderful that he wonders, considering what he's done and the tunes that have come out of him and his friends' heads over the years, isn't it great that he wonders, even without words, how come songs and tunes. He doesn't say my songs, does he?
No,
he's so humble about
it.
He
is. But it is. Music is just a bunch of beeps and boops, right? And what he's getting at is it's just a boop 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 boop, right? So how is it that when you put them in the right order, you get something magical?
Yeah.
What in philosophy you might call an emergent property, something greater than the sum of the parts.
Yeah.
And of course he's wondered that. He's an intellectual.
Well, to you and to him, it may be a series of beeps and boops, but to us, the mere listener, some beeps and boops tend to be better than others, don't they? All right, headlines from the book, if you don't mind. So, give us the headlines on this sort of general question. How can music be good for us? What specifically can it do? Give us some sort of standout benefits of music, and how best can we consume it, depending on what we want from it, please.
I'm going to go right to a really big point.
Go on.
Which is that the best thing we can do is all play an instrument.
Yeah.
It's neuroprotective. It's good for the brain. You play.
Yeah.
You don't have to be thinking, I'm never going to be a professional. Why should I play? But that's the typical objection. People say, well, I used to take music in school. When I was 12, I realized I'd never be a professional, so why did I continue? But you never hear anybody saying, well, I'm dropping out of soccer practice because I'm never going to be a professional.
Yeah.
I'm never going to walk in my kitchen and cook because I'm never going to be a professional chef.
Yeah.
I'm no Chris Evans, so I'm not going to talk. People don't say that. But they say, well, I'm no Paul McCartney, so why would I play music? It's a tragedy because throughout our evolutionary history, as we've talked about before here, music was part of everyday life and everybody participated, and we've lost touch with that.
Well, we haven't, because we do seem to be falling in love again, or if not more than ever, with live events, live musical events. They do say the more our life gets smaller via this screen or via whichever screen it is we're looking at the time, sometimes double screening, triple screening, the more, ironically, that makes us want to go out and have these massive experiences. Mostly, not always, but sometimes, because that's what we see on these screens.
Right.
So they're sort of seeding that in our minds. And then we go and see it. And because life is different now, and we are experiencing community a bit less, or a lot less sometimes, from one aspect, when we do get together, it's all the more profound for it.
It is, and we now know, in my field of neuroscience, we know something about why this is. There's a chemical called oxytocin that's released when you are hearing music together, even more so when you're singing together. Oxytocin unlocks circuits in the brain that help engender trust, tolerance, feelings of connection and community. It's why, before we even knew the neuroscience of it, it's why how politicians figured out, well, you have music at a rally and it makes everybody energized, or at a sporting event.
Yeah. No, it really does work, doesn't it? Speak to us, if you don't mind, you talk about Adele in here, and it's so funny because is it the case that if you're listening to Adele and you love Adele, and she may be writing a song that's about pining for a lost love, pining for unrequited love, pining for a love that will never be, is that because you identify with that? And I was thinking yesterday, reading your book, if you then do find love and Adele is still singing about those other kinds of unrequited love, do you not like Adele as much as you used to? do you know what I mean?
I think the strength of Adele or Joni Mitchell or Paul McCartney is that they write about themes that all of us grapple with.
Right.
They're enduring historic themes going back to the biblical days, and the Psalms are songs of pining.
Yeah.
The Homerian epics. These are deep feelings and of yearning and questioning the meaning of life and the role we play in our social world. The long-term memory for that is not just in our own life experience, but sort of an evolutionary echo of ancestors feeling that. So I think that, even when you find what you're looking for, there's a part of you that resonates with the you that didn't have it and the you that's afraid of losing it. So it can still move you very deeply.
Yeah, and you do say in the book, sometimes sad songs can be very good for you.
Sad songs are the medicine for when you're depressed. Paradoxically, perhaps, if you're depressed, it's typically because you feel misunderstood.
Right.
In some sense, you feel misunderstood. That is depression.
Uh-huh.
The last thing you want is a rousing Sousa march or something to come on and get up out of bed, straighten up and fly right. What's the matter with you? It's a bunch of happy people continuing to misunderstand you, perpetuating that.
So you want your music to meet you where you are
Exactly
on that
right.
day.
Exactly right. When the sad song comes on, you go, that person understands me. Now I feel validated, and I'm sitting at the edge of the cliff staring into the abyss, and there's somebody next to me now.
Yeah.
And they're putting it into this beautiful work of art. Oh, my goodness, that means they got through this tragedy, came out the other side and made art out of it. Yeah. That's inspiring.
And the sadder a song is, or the more sentimental or sensitive a song is, that does sort of speak to more to us, to the deeper end of our souls. I think generally thinking about it. And so it's more about our roots, that is it. And if we were a tree, a giant redwood, for example, on a great day, at the top of it, we might be swaying in the air, trying to touch the sunshine in that blue sky, and that's us partying. That's the high energy celebratory music. But the depths of us, who we really are, that's always going to be sadder.
That is a wonderful analogy, the roots and the tree. I never heard that before, but you're right. There is some sort of psychic, metaphysical root that each of us has.
Just you talking about sad music makes me feel a bit safer.
Yeah.
Really, quite strangely.
I don't know that all of us have sad roots. Some of us are dispositionally happy.
Yeah.
And we have happy roots. Each of us has a set point.
Yeah.
The glass half full, glass half empty.
Let's talk about Fast Car then, Tracy Chapman's Fast Car.
Yeah.
Because that song speaks to you and to most of us on two different levels of therapy, if you like. Because that song is unbelievably clever. Do you think, first, that's the first part of the question, so tell us about those two parts of the music, that two-pronged attack, helpful attack on, or sort of two lifeboats as opposed to one for what we might need in the moment with regards to that song. And when somebody comes up with a song that is so clever on two levels or many, many levels, do you think they know they're doing it, or is it just the gift they've been given?
Well, in terms of what writers are thinking...
Tell us about Fast Car first, why it's like that.
Yeah, so Fast Car is this song that was, of course, a big hit.
Amazing song.
It is an amazing song.
Amazing.
And it works on, as you say, on two levels because it has this catchy chorus. And I remember when we're driving, it's just, if that's the earworm, that's what sticks in your head, and it's ebullient, it's effervescent.
And it gives us a break from the verse, the story of the verse.
Which is, of course, the beauty of a great pop song. The chorus is supposed to redeem you from whatever doldrums you were in the verse.
It's so clever.
And the chorus comes in, and that's what the ear goes to. It's what the memory goes to. It's what you recall about the song.
It's when we remember to breathe in a song, isn't it? It's like,
yes.
And we can breathe now.
But yeah, and you feel floating like you're on helium balloons. But when you actually listen, I heard that song for 10 years without ever hearing the verse. And then I realized, it's this horribly tragic story about a woman whose life is unwinding. Yeah. She's stuck in this small town. She's got an alcoholic father. She feels that she has to stay there and take care of him. Her life is withering away doing this, but she feels the weight of responsibility. If only she could escape. She meets some guy. We think it's a guy. We don't know. She meets somebody with a fast car. Yeah. Can you drive and get me out of this place?
Get me out of Dodge.
Just get me out of here, and then we'll start a family and we'll have a life. And then they do leave. Yeah. And it turns out, after they leave to this new place, to the city, where the promise is, the bright lights, a new life, she's the one with the job as a checkout girl. The partner is sitting in the pub doing this sort of generational echo of what her father did, getting drunk all the time and not actually doing anything. She's stuck again, and she finally says, "Take your fast car and keep on driving.
Yeah.
Get out of my freaking life."
Yeah, it's not going to work.
It's this epic in one
song. In 3 minutes.
Yeah.
What the heck? So clever. We had Bob Geldof in one day, and he started talking about the difference between lyrics in a song and lines in a poem. And he said they are completely different because lyrics are written to hold hands with music.
Yeah.
And together they have this sort of superpower. Of course, he said it's a little bit like the lines in... The lines in between the words of a poem, the spaces, if you like.
Sting talks about this in the introduction to his lyrics book, about how the lyrics are the clothing on the mannequin of the music.
Oh my gosh.
The skeleton. And they are very, very different. Lyrics certainly have poetic qualities, but they're different because the music has its own internal momentum, its driving force forward, and the music gives you permission to let go and let it determine for you the pace.
Oh my God. It's
so
clever.
It carries the words with it, unlike
music
a poem.
messes with my mind and melts it, which is sometimes why I can't listen to music too much because it overwhelms me. You say the best way, if you're in the right frame of mind, to listen to music is to surrender to it. Is that the most effective way we can listen to music?
Well, absolutely, but sometimes you don't have to indulge in the act of surrender. The music just takes you over.
Yeah.
If you're relaxed, you're comfortable, you're not occupied by, you're not distracted by doing something else.
Yeah.
The music grabs hold of your consciousness, and I mean this in a very literal neurological sense. It grabs a switch in your brain that puts you immediately into what we call the daydreaming mode.
DMN.
Yes, DMN.
Yeah.
You're the A student, aren't you?
Yeah, no, I've read the book. I loved it. Yeah.
The default mode network is where the brain wants to go when you release control. So we have these two modes of attention. I'm paying attention. I'm forcing myself to focus on what's in front of me, or I let my mind wander. That mind-wandering mode that music can take you to, where you see visual images perhaps, or somebody has to go, Earth to Chris, pull you back. That's a restorative, healthy mode of being where it replenishes spent neurochemicals. It's kind of like taking a nap or having a dream.
Yeah. So let's get again to some more headlines, if you don't mind. So how can music help movement, people who are struggling with movement? How can it help PTSD? And another one, how can it help, what would the other one be? The other major, pain.
For our listeners out there in Radioland,
Yeah.
every other radio interview show I do, the host has an earpiece and the producer is barking questions into that earpiece. And let me just tell everybody out there, Chris does not have an earpiece. Chris has no notes in front of him. This is all coming out of that mind of his.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do.
It really is something.
So answers, headlines. There you go. Pain, movement, and what was the other one? I can't remember now.
Well, movement disorders. Let's talk about those.
Okay.
So music kind of short circuits a lot of processes in the brain that it has direct access to. So in other words, when we hear music with a beat, I mean, not all music, ambient music has less of a beat. James Brown has a big beat.
Yeah.
You hear music with a heavy beat and it connects directly to the movement centers of your brain. Even little infants start wiggling their bums.
They can't help themselves.
Because it's hardwired that way.
Yeah, we had it last night.
So when you...
We did. Around the dinner table. We put music on and the kids, we got 6-year-old twins. They can't eat their dinner for dancing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So this is an instinct that many of us get embarrassed when we're older, and we tend to not move because we're afraid that people are looking at us. But kids know.
Yeah.
They feel it. And when you have a movement disorder like Parkinson's or multiple sclerosis, one of the things that happens is that the circuits that allow you to make smooth, continuous movement have been degraded by the disease. There's no longer an internal clock guiding one foot after the other.
I see.
You put on music with the same tempo as your walking gait. We now have identified populations of neurons, millions of nerve cells in
It's
the
like
brain.
a musical pacemaker almost.
It's exactly that. I love that. I'm gonna steal that.
Steal away.
The neurons lock in step. They synchronize to the beat
It's
of the
as
music.
simple as that.
And then the person can walk again because they now have an external clock for it.
That is amazing. What about pain and PTSD?
Very different things, psychic pain versus physical pain. In the case of physical pain, our lab was the first to show that your brain produces its own endogenous, that is internal, opiates, in response to music you like, which are an analgesic, a pain reliever. Music is very effective at pain relief.
And it's not just distraction, it's different.
It's distracting, yes. It's mood altering, yes. And it's a triumvirate of processes. The third one is you're actually releasing the same chemicals that you might take in a pill, but when they're released in the brain, they're non-addictive.
Wow.
No opiate crisis. The PTSD is a condition, everybody's had trauma of some sort. But PTSD is a clinical diagnosis where post-traumatic stress disorder sets in after some horrible trauma that impacts your daily life after the trauma is over. We typically see it in veterans returning from a war where they've seen horrible things or done unimaginably horrible things. And it's not simply that those things happened, it's that they cannot function in daily life anymore. They're so consumed by it. And one successful program for dealing with this, more successful than drugs or talk therapy, is songwriting with soldiers.
Yeah.
The soldiers are paired with professional songwriters, and they write a song about that trauma, which puts the song out there in the world in musical form. It's no longer locked inside them. It can see it objectively, and it releases it to the world, and they become healed through that.
And you yourself, I mean, obviously you do this for a living and you're unbelievably good at it. And I love the story about in 76 when you were a student yourself and there were no neuroscience labs anywhere. And now there are famous labs and there are famous people with podcasts to they've got these neuro labs going on. None of that was a thing then, was it?
No,
it
wasn't,
was unbelievable. No. So well done you for getting here without any of that. But you have also experienced yourself the benefit of music therapy after a specific personal challenge.
You're talking about when I had a concussion,
Yeah.
I think. And I lost the ability to play music. My brain wasn't working. I lost speech. I had aphasia.
And so for people who don't know, you've been a lifelong musician and an accomplished musician as well.
Yeah, and so it was funny. it was a funny experience as a neuroscientist to feel like my brain was sending signals to my fingers.
Yeah.
And my fingers weren't doing what...
And you know about all this stuff.
Yeah,
Oh
they
my
weren't
gosh.
doing what they were supposed to do.
Yeah.
But over time, just through repetition, I was able to build new circuits, new neural pathways. Process is called neurogenesis or... I'm losing the fancy word for it,
Don't worry
but
about
it doesn't matter. But
You could make it up. We wouldn't know the difference, to be honest.
The brain heals itself.
You're right. The neuroplasticity, wasn't
That's the word.
Is that the word?
Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome. Is it true that if you want to give up chocolate, you can take up music instead without the calories? Is that right?
Is that right? I haven't heard that.
Doesn't it have the same effect?
Thank you. Yes, I like the link. Yes, the thought of giving up chocolate is abhorrent to me. But
Yeah.
yes,
I've done it this year. That's why it's forefront of my mind.
well, so music is actually helpful in treating certain forms of addiction because it activates the same reward network.
Here we go.
Here, these structures called the nucleus accumbens and the part of the limbic system in the brain signal reward. And for people with a certain genotype who are easily addicted to things like alcohol or gambling or chocolate, cocaine, whatever, the same circuit my lab showed is activated when you listen to music that you like. So it can serve as a kind of substitute, allowing yourself to wean yourself off of all that. Now, you were asking earlier about songwriting.
Yeah.
What do songwriters do? What are they thinking about? Mm-hmm. And there are certainly professional songwriters who are very deliberate and systematic about it. Methodical. But I think that the songs that endure, the songs that we'll be listening to 40 years later.
I agree. I know what you're going to say. From the heart.
They're from the heart, and they come from... Roseanne Cash talked about it like she puts up her catcher's mitt, and she catches the song. Yeah. It was there all along. She's just grabbing it.
Yeah. Or channeling it, or...
You have to have a certain amount of facility with language and with music to do that.
You have to earn your place as that particular... lightning conductor.
Yeah, it was the Beatles playing 10,000 Hours in Hamburg, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was, you get there, and then, creativity is rewarded by all that work.
Yeah, you earn your place at the table.
Yeah.
Then the compound interest of keeping winding that flywheel, it is drip fed to you for as long as you deserve it.
And you recognize when a good idea comes versus a bad idea.
Yeah.
And you know which ones to run with. And you're receptive to it. You trust the process enough. So when I write songs, when I'm lucky, I'm just turning off my brain and something happens and it's my subconscious percolating. And then later I go back over. Joni Mitchell taught me this. You go back over and you edit out the stuff that just was a little bit...
Did you just say Joni Mitchell taught me this? Did you just actually say that?
Oh,
Am I hearing things?
I got to stop dropping names.
Joni, hang on a minute. Back the truck up.
Like my friend, the Dalai Lama, says, when you drop names, Dan, you sound like an idiot.
Stop it now. Tell us about you and Joni Mitchell.
Well, so Joni and I became friends in the 90s, and she's somewhat of a hermit, as you may know. She's a recluse.
But she has a festival as well, doesn't she?
Yeah, but she's a bit of a recluse. But we became friends, and she began mentoring me in songwriting in the early 2000s. I've been writing songs since the 70s, but she took an interest. I think because she was bored and had nothing better to do, and I was such a hopeless case.
Shush.
But she didn't write songs with me, but she taught me how to think about the process of songwriting. So you just let it happen, and then later you go back over and you say, well, is that actually the best word for that? If oak tree came to me in the song, Bernie Taupin has this great line, sat on the roof, kicked off the moss. And he's talked in interviews about how when he writes, and Joni does the same thing, Bernie puts himself in the place. He imagines a very particular place and the sights and smells and the flora and fauna of it. And even if they don't make it into the song, he's imagining that sense of place.
Yeah.
And so Joni says, okay, you have oak tree in your song. It came to you in this reverie. But is an oak tree the right tree? Yeah. Or is tree even the right metaphor?
Or is it about smell? Because the second you say oak tree, I'm smelling the forest.
Well, exactly. So maybe you go there because it's more visceral.
Yeah.
So your brain can come in and help you after the fact.
I love that. Because Bono famously, Bono, the way he writes his lyrics.
Oh, I see. Who's dropping names now?
I've only interviewed him a few times. But he would go to the studio. He does go to the studio, and the band start playing, and he literally just starts singing over the music.
Yeah.
And he doesn't go in with any ideas or anything, and it either happens or it doesn't happen.
That's right.
Mostly it doesn't happen, but boy, when it happens, obviously it's quite good.
Well, and to come full circle, the reason that can happen more in that context than in poetry is because there's this internal driving rhythmic momentum of the music.
Yeah.
Right? His rhythm section is moving ahead, whether he is or not.
Yeah.
And the way they play the notes and the accent structure and the meter leads him to certain words that fit that scheme.
Right. So it may be the edge on the bass is resonating with the Bono's soul to the extent it sparks something deep within, and that's what sets him off. And he can't do it. He probably wouldn't be able to do it without being around his mates in a studio with them doing what they do on their instruments.
And the secret of their success,
oh my God,
like
it's great, isn't it? This is so good. I love this chat. Go on.
The secret of their success, like the Grateful Dead or Fish,
yes,
is that they know each other, or Miles Davis is the best example. Miles in the 1950s with Kind of Blue gave all of us permission to do something nobody had really done before. And that is, don't play, just listen to what your bandmates are doing and react.
Yeah.
And that's what Bono in U2 is able to do. They know each other well enough, musically, if not personally, that Bono can not act. He can trust and he can react, like in sketch comedy.
Yeah.
You don't wait to put in something that you've been holding in. You react to what's happening in the moment. And I think the listener knows when you're perfectly in the moment as a songwriter or a performer, you're not thinking about what just happened or what's going to happen.
100%.
You're in the note now, and that's all you're thinking about is now.
Yeah, because there's deep stillness within the melody or the refrain. Whatever it may be, like, Across the Universe, Day in the Life, Yesterday. I know I'm picking all Beatles songs here. Can we square the circle? Can we go back to the Beatles? You talk about the Beatles, you talk about Can't Buy Me Love, you talk about Something by George Harrison, Something in the Way She Moves. So we hold the first note for 6 times. This means anyone can write songs.
Your day breaks, your mind aches, you find... Right, the idea of holding,
And then there's Can't Buy Me Love, which is a bit like When the Saints Go Marching In, which is a bit like This Land Is Your Land, which is a bit like Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto, all that kind of stuff. And it's all in the book. We've got it all here ready to go, but we're running out of time. I need to square the circle with the Beatles, right? Why do we all love the Beatles so much? What do they do with their music that speaks to us in so many ways, that uplifts us, that moves us, that engages us, that spellbinds us and transcends us, takes us to a place that we didn't know existed, we don't know how to find. Sometimes we don't even know if we've been there and returned back home.
We could do a whole show about why we love the Beatles, of course, and you and I could trade 8s, as it were. But I think the music is deceptive in that the effervescent sound of their voices, the friendliness of their voices, the way the songs are presented sonically, they sound like very simple pop songs. If you go and you try to play one of them, you realize there's some very complex chords that harken back to Bartok and Hindemith, and there's a lot of complexity harmonically. You don't notice it. You don't notice they're using what musicians would call non-diatonic chords that normally would not be in the key. And the reason you don't notice it is the melodies are so powerful and seamless that they can do this really complicated jazz stuff or classical chord changes underneath. Your ear is drawn to these catchy melodies. You don't notice the complexity. And that's why it can be rewarding for decades.
Clearly they knew what they were doing, but did they know that aspect of what they were doing?
They did not know music theory at all. In fact, there's this funny story. My piano tuner tunes Sir Paul's pianos in Los Angeles.
Did he give Paul the book?
No, he didn't actually. My agent got the book to Paul's agent.
Imagine that. What do you do? I tune Paul McCartney's piano? Oh,
yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
So he was tuning Paul's piano.
Yes.
He has a book out, actually, Jim Wilson. It's a wonderful book. And he says that he went to Paul's house and he tuned Paul's guitar. And as he always does, after it's tuned, he plays it. So he's playing a song, and Paul walks in and says, "Oh, I really like that. What is that?" And Jim says, "Well, I wrote it." Paul says, "Really? Would you play it again?" So Jim plays it again, and Paul stops him. He says, "I really like that part where you go to the black keys." And Jim says, "Oh, you mean the modulation?" And Paul says, "The what now?"
Wow.
Standard term, among musicians. Paul does not know theory, but he doesn't have to. And in fact, for thousands of years, musicians didn't know music theory. That came much, much later to describe what people heard in their heads and their hearts.
Because it's like life. You can only live it forwards, but you can only understand it backwards.
Exactly right. So the Beatles listened to Rodgers and Hammerstein. They wanted to be Rodgers and Hammerstein. Right. Cole Porter, Gershwin. They listened to classical music. They were steeped in it. They had internalized the sounds of this and then replicated it through the lens of pop music. And I think if rock and roll had come along, if they had been born 20 years later, they would have done it through hip hop.
Yeah, of course they would. They would have had to do it.
Yeah.
They were meant to do it. They were born to do it.
Yeah.
This is all wonderful. I love you for coming in. Please, you're always welcome here. It's always a yes from us, Daniel.
Thank you, Chris.
This book is amazing. Music as Medicine, How We Can Harness Its Therapeutic Power by Daniel Levitin. It is a fascinating book. I say that, more importantly, Paul McCartney says that. Before you go, it's very important to, if you can play an instrument, doesn't matter how, doesn't matter which instrument, just try and get to play an instrument.
Doesn't matter how good you are.
Yeah, join a choir.
Yeah.
Sing, go to church,
Yeah.
listen to music. Are they the general takeaways from this chat?
Yes.
Anything else?
This is a great moment in history for music. There are 200 million songs on the streaming services.
Of course.
This is a great opportunity for songwriters and musicians who otherwise wouldn't be able to find an audience to be discovered. And if you start playing around and looking at what's out there, you may find a new favorite song by an artist you've never heard of.
Yeah. Yeah. And you may have a song in you that you never thought you'd ever... Oh, you did have in you. We all have that. We all have that gold. We've just got to have a look for it if we can be bothered. Can we have a round of applause, please, for Daniel, his book, Music as Medicine, Daniel Levitin. He's all over YouTube. He's got his very gentle lectures there, his pieces to camera. I went on a Levitin sort of little magical mystery tour last night and I loved it. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
Cheers, mate.